welcome back. We're so excited you could join us here again. So last time, Liz and I followed the format where she kind of interviewed me, and I got to be the guest speaker for the episode. Today, we're gonna reverse it a little bit. We're gonna flip everything on its head, and I'm gonna be kind of interviewing Liz. Of course, there's gonna be, conversational back and forth, but we're really excited to share some of this information with you today, some of the details we've been digging into. So we're going to continue following along with our theme of goal setting and maintaining discipline, and how can we help support each other to better achieve and reach those goals that we're setting out for ourselves. So along those lines, we have discussed envisioning our goals, writing them down, following those baby steps. I actually read something just this last week where they called it following a micro yes, which I kind of love. It's just a tiny little push in the right direction. And I think everything that we could do to make those small adjustments really helps push things in the right direction and keeps us motivated to do it. So follow your micro yes. And then using persistence and discipline, how we find those things to better achieve those goals that we're setting up aside for ourselves. So looking back a ways, back in the 1980s, there was a gentleman by the name of George T. Doran, and he actually came up with an acronym. He came up with an acronym to help managers and leaders set clear and effective goals for themselves and their teams. So he published a paper. It was in 1981. In this journal, in the paper that he published, it was titled "There's a Smart Way to Write Management Goals and Objectives." And so SMART is the acronym, S-M-A-R-T. And many of you who have been in team building, leadership type settings, you've probably heard this acronym before. It is very commonly referenced. But just to break it down quickly for you, S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A is achievable, R stands for relevant, and T stands for time bound. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of go back and forth. We're going to break down this acronym, and then we are going to give it a little bit of a spin and tell you guys a little more specifically how we try to attack our goals, still following this acronym, but then adding a little bit more to it. So, Liz, when we think of the word specific and we are attaching it to a goal, what does that first letter in the SMART goal setting do for you or mean for you?
Hey, Erin, thanks for having me on. Gosh, specific, it seems obvious, but when we're talking about our goals, we really have to dig deep and keep going. Is that specific enough? Is that going to get me to where I want to go? If we're talking about a financial goal, I know you have commented, you want to, it could be pay off your house. I know you have a story about this. It could be losing weight. I just want to, I want to lose weight for whatever it is. If you're not specific enough, then you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. So whatever it is, you want to clarify, what does this goal actually mean to you? So when people say, I want to make more money, then, the specific side of that would be to clarify exactly what are you talking about. And it may be, what am I making now? And what does that mean to make more later? So is it $1 more? Is it I'm making $20 an hour? I want to make $40 an hour. I want to be a millionaire. So very critical to be specific about what your actual goal is. The more clarity, the more visual clarity that you can get on that goal, I think the better that it's going to be.
Absolutely. I love that. We talked before about adding even like a sense of like envisioning the surroundings. If you can be specific about like who's going to be surrounding you when you achieve these goals and what is it going to help you accomplish to do next. I think every little detail that you can add there really just helps to get you closer to being able to reach that goal, just because as specific as you can be, more likely what steps you need to take to get there. So I think it just helps clarify everything for you. So awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Just I'm going to add a few onto that, because I do think that visualization in the specificity is very important because, when we're talking about, it could be anything. It could be planning for your vacation. If you're not really clear on what kind of experience, I know I'm tempted sometimes to just say to my husband, just you take care of it and I don't want to worry about it. Well, that could lead to a couple of things. Perhaps you go over budget because in your mind you were thinking of one budget and he was thinking of something totally different, or you end up at, a hotel that you weren't thinking, or a specific location. So I think that, again, going back to the visualization, I always say if you can visualize it, if you can dream about it and visualize it and really get the details down, that's what we're talking about is, we've all had the dream that may seem out of reach, but when you actually sit there and think about it and determine, wow, this is something that I could actually do and achieve. And especially when you're questioning, what are the other people with the same goal doing that I'm not doing? Maybe that can clarify some of what those specifics need to be, and make them in a kind of a step-by-step manner rather than saying, you have to do this giant, I think it reduces it more from this one big giant goal down to, oh, okay, I have to take these steps. And I think that's where being specific with your goal is very beneficial because it will provide you with some of the steps that you need to do to complete your goal.
I agree completely. I love that. Thank you so much for those extra little steps and pointers. I think it's all very important to make sure that we keep in mind. So we covered specific. Let's jump into measurable. What about a goal needs to be measurable, and what do we mean when we say measurable?
Well, I think on the measurable side, it's, again, taking the specifics and taking it one step further. If you want to lose weight, how much weight are you going to lose? If you want to pay off your home, how much money are you going to do, or how much are you going to pay off, and when are you going to pay it off? Obviously, again, I start to jump ahead because it does tend to lump things together, but you can measure whatever goal you're setting is, you know, what do you want and how are you going to grow that niche that you're, that space that you're trying to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. Just a cute little story that I have, not cute, I guess it's really impressive in my mind. On the topic of being measurable, and this is kind of what I think about when I kind of attack this one specifically, this letter of the acronym. I have some good friends, a young couple who they bought their first house just a handful of years ago. And when they bought their first house, they were in their mid 20s. And I remember them saying, our goal is to pay off our house. We want to have it paid off in just a few years. And I remember thinking, wow, that's amazing. That's an incredible goal. It's certainly not something that you hear very often these days. Most people kind of, I think they go into their first home and everybody knows and expects, all right, I'm signing up for that 30-year mortgage at my fixed rate. And I'm just going to follow the rules to get it paid off in 30 years. If I move within that time, I'll roll over the equity from one house to the next. But it's there. I carry the equity with me. Hopefully, I can sell my house for more than I bought it for. And then I know that equity stays with me. So it's just not something that, really you don't hear it very often. So it stood out to me and I thought, well, that's really cool. I hope they achieve it. And then didn't really think it that much more of it until it was probably a couple months later. I was over at their house and I remember seeing they bought one of those big, it was like a thermometer, like kind of a dry erase like image of it basically that you see that nonprofit organizations will buy when they're trying to reach a fundraising goal, or some organization that's trying to raise money. You have the big thermometer and you have your dry erase marker and you have little hashtags, hash marks in along the lines, and you write in, we need to get to $25,000 is our goal, and then 50,000, and then 100,000. And I saw this huge thing on their refrigerator with a red marker, and they were just filling it in and coloring it in as they went. So every time when they paid off the first $20,000, they got to fill in that part of the bubble. When they paid off up to 50,000, then they got to fill it in. And I remember them working their way up. And every time I would go over to their house and they shared with me when people would come over and they'd say, "What is this?" And you could see right at the top, they wrote in big, bold black letters, "Pay off house." That was their goal. They knew what the goal was. They saw it every single day. I mean, we all get into our refrigerators every single day. Most of us quite a few times a day. I know I do. So every time they were going into the kitchen and they were opening up their refrigerator, they would see this goal staring them in the face. And it definitely helped them to keep it front of mind. And because it was very specifically measurable, they could see as they were getting closer and closer to achieving that goal, which was the coolest thing. And I remember asking them, "So, what are the things that you talk about since you see this every single day?" And they said, "Well, if we're contemplating taking a trip, do we want to spend all the money that we have saved up, or do we want to take a portion of that, pay it to the house, and then the other portion we maybe go on a slightly less extravagant trip this year?" So it really helped them to kind of, as they're deciding on where they're going to spend their money, how they're going to allocate their time, what they're going to do with their resources, it really helped kind of keep them on track with that. And I will say, I give them huge applause for this. They truly paid off their house, their very first house, in 3 years
Right.
of making the purchase. And I think it's just such a cool thing to achieve as a couple and as a young married couple to go through that process. And I feel like that's, I mean, talk about a sense of empowerment. That does it 100%.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think what you're saying in a nutshell is, what is the measuring stick
yeah.
that you're using to reach your goal? And you used a very specific measuring tool, which is cool. And calendars are another way. They talk about how many days do you need to create a goal. And I've heard, I don't know, what's your best guess on a goal? How many days?
I To achieve a goal or to create a habit, because I've heard different things.
Habit. Create a
Create a
habit.
habit, I've heard everything from you need a minimum of 60 days to 120 days.
Yeah, I'm somewhere like, I just recently I read 21 days. I'm like, that's absolutely
That's
not
not
enough.
enough.
But, like, so anywhere from a month to 6 months, let's say. But a calendar is a great way as well. And I've done that with numerous goals, is to check off the days that you do what you say you're going to do that day. And it might just be something that your goal is to do it 3 days a month or 3 days a week. So, but I know, going back to my favorite items, either a notebook or a some kind of a day timer. I'm on one of my favorite ones called Silk and Sonder. I'm sure you can look that up. But it is pretty cool because they do give you a lot of pointers, and any of them do. The Franklin, Covey, there's so many. I think I've tried maybe 3 or 4 different ones just this year. So they don't always work, but I always get something out of them. And that's kind of I could feel like a failure because I didn't stick with it, but also I found what I felt to be a better tool. So, and going through that process of writing it down, checking it off, figuring out a better way, your measuring stick idea might not be for you, but keep trying. And again, it's all about, what doesn't succeed on day one, keep trying, keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you completely. And I've used the calendar many times. I know that's my go to. If I've got an exam I have to study for, the first thing I do is look at, okay, how many units are there? How many chapters? And I break it down to, what do I need to have done each week? What do I need to get through? And then where am I scheduling my practice tests? So there's all different ways to measure the progress, but I think the important thing is making sure you, like you said, you figure out what works for you. If you try a method or an app or some specific, way to measure it and it doesn't quite work or it doesn't quite fit, it's okay to change. It's okay to make a shift that you feel is going to be easier for you and makes things a little bit more, I think, exciting along the way. If it takes an app that's giving you a little bit of motivation and little tips for success along the way, I think that's an awesome thing. So, we went through specific, we went through measurable. Now, how do we make them achievable? And I will say this is one that I struggle with because when it comes to trying to identify what's achievable, to me, like
Anything is.
yeah, the idealist he says, well, shouldn't anything be within my reach? Shouldn't I be able to? But Liz, for you, when you think of what's achievable, what does this mean to you?
I agree. It 100% goes back to if you can dream it, you can achieve it. But going back to being specific, we're not just saying, "Hey, I want to be able to have my own private jet." Okay, that's a cool goal, but what are all of the steps that need to occur for that to become a reality to me? There's money involved, there's why would I be flying around in a jet involved, all these different things. So you really have to be specific, so that again, it ties back into that first goal. If you can truly visualize what you're doing in this goal to where you would consider yourself successful at whatever goal that you're jotting down, then I believe it is achievable. So don't take this to say that you should settle. Quite the opposite. I think maybe if you get to this step and you think it's maybe not, maybe you just need to start back and go back to the specifics and say, okay, you know, I was even with the measurable, being a procrastinator, a master procrastinator. I think going back, I almost work backward and say, okay, I got to get this test done because we're, in our business, we have to do this, continuing education. And some of the topics are a little less exciting than others. There have been times where I'm literally working backwards, going, okay, this is due on this date. And when is the last possible date that I can actually do this? So, so I'm working backwards and saying, okay, I can do all this other stuff that I really want to be doing, but and it's a goal. You got to get it done. It might not be my most fun goal, but side note, back to achievable. It's interesting because when we talk about things that are out of our realm, or when somebody might say to you, what are you thinking? Your family, friends, and loved ones, and try they're not trying to make you feel bad. They're just trying to have you be realistic. Is this really something achievable, or are you just setting yourself up for failure? So years ago, for those of you who don't know, I started working at a bank. That was my start to my financial career. I thought, honestly, I got into the business because I liked hours. I liked banker's hours. So, and investments ended up a little bit farther down the road for me. It wasn't right away. I started in the customer service area, then I worked my way up to a loan officer. And at the time, and to this day, I never quite finished my college degree, which, to truth to be told, you can't do what we do being a CFP. I'm a grandfathered person with our career. So I'm very, very fortunate to have gotten to where I am. But I will say, I always was a believer in my dreams. What I did in my early 20s, I said, okay, I want to be a loan officer. That was my first goal at the time. So I didn't mess around. I went to the regional manager. I called him up, talked to his assistant or whoever it was at the time, and got an appointment with him. And I sat down with him, did not know him, and I said, what is it that I need to do to become a loan officer? I want to be a loan officer for this company. And we had an amazing talk. He turned out eventually to be a boss of mine because I did make it to being a loan officer. And he went through this whole process how one of his best loan officers was a bartender. To him, it wasn't all about the college degree. It wasn't all about the written word that, oh my gosh, you have to have this and this and this. For him, he knew that a role like that, the personality type, the work ethic, and everything else was more important. So, so it was crazy And I know people told me how crazy I was to just go to his office and as a, like 22-year-old and say, this is what I want to do. And then as a loan officer, you end up getting your license to do some investments and so forth. So the rest is history. But that was, really, again, don't ever limit yourself if somebody tells you that you can't achieve your dreams.
Yeah, it's such a good reminder. And thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I think it's such a great story and a good reminder. Like you said, this is not, when we think about what is achievable, this is not the time that we want to try and talk ourselves out of it, or like you said, try and limit ourselves, but be realistic about it. If we're all very honest with ourselves, we know what our strengths are, we know what our weaknesses are. And if you have, sometimes it's going to that one confidant that you have and saying, all right, this is what I'm envisioning. This is the goal that I have. In your mind, you know me as well as anybody. What do you think I need to do? Do you think this is something that I can achieve? And sometimes it's just hearing that reinforcement from somebody that you trust and somebody that really gets where you're coming from and having a conversation. But, Liz, to your point, you to walk into somebody's office like that at 22, I mean, that takes a lot of confidence, a lot of strength, and certainly I've seen you do it in your career. I've watched you as a friend, and I know that you have that drive. And I think that's a huge benefit and a huge skill that you carry along with you. And you can see what it's done to help you achieve your goals. And I think that's awesome. So take a look. Maybe this is an opportunity to kind of like reflect a little and look inward and say, okay, what can I do? What are my strengths? And how can I use them to help me achieve this goal that I'm setting aside for myself?
Two comments I got to add on the confidence. Trust me, at 2022, you do not have the confidence. So Brian Tracy, if you want to go back and look up his tapes on motivational training and being successful, which I listened to in my like teens, weird, but I was always into this stuff. So anyways, Brian Tracy says basically fake it till you make it. And he truly, it sounds a little negative if you interpret it the wrong way, like you're faking. People don't want to believe that you're faking. But the reality is like you believe you can do this, but it's like stepping on stage, you're going, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. So you just have to kind of just put on, I tell my daughters, lift your chin up, don't look down. You keep your head, face forward and just imagine yourself, just achieving the goal. The other comment I just wanted to make is the book that I'm just starting to read right now. To be fair, I don't have all of the answers, but The Illusion of Money. Don't base your goals, whether you do them or not, on saying, I don't have enough money. I can't do this because I can't step away from my job. I can't do this because of my company, because of the, all money based. Really focus on your goals and start thinking of them as, if money were not an issue, what would my next step be? And that might give you some more clarity to see, is this really an achievable goal? And you'd be surprised how much you start making happen.
Yes, I think that's great. And I think it is important to remember those things. And so, next letter in the lineup is R for relevant. To me, this is kind of like my why. Why is this relevant? How does this fit with my current lifestyle? If I'm analyzing the goal and I'm assessing it and I'm looking at, all right, what do I need to do to change my lifestyle? How do I fit this into my current routine and my current schedule? What do I need to maybe sacrifice on a temporary basis to achieve it? But that's kind of how I view this. And it might be a little different for other people. But when I see the word relevant, that's kind of where it takes me. Liz, how about you when you think about this part of your SMART goals?
I think of relevance, realistic, and resistance. So I like, where are you? How does this fit into your life? Which is what you were just saying. Do you have a family? Do you have kids? What challenges are you going to have to overcome? So I think, it's really easy to say, that this is, completely relevant. Yeah, flying my plane all over the place is, completely relevant. But okay, if you have young kids in the house, or you have a husband who has a totally different line of work that you do, or you have a sick family member, I mean, it could be a lot of things, or you're in an area that it's not as easy to move out of. The it's relevant. What are those, to me, it's what are all those little ancillary things that could kind of throw a wrench into things?
Mhm.
And are you able to flip the script and again have that conversation, those maybe difficult conversations, even with our businesses? There have been some very difficult conversations that I've had with my family, just when the two of us want to get together and have a podcast, because it takes more time out of our schedule and the kids can't come knocking on the door or assume that I'm going to be available, any day. Or so talk to them, write down your challenges just like you write down your goals. Write down the challenges, because when you actively make that attempt to write down what the issues are, you're forcing yourself to think about what the possible solutions are.
Mhm.
So if you open yourself up that, yeah, this is a challenge, how can I fix this? Once you start questioning the bigger picture of how can I do this, I am not kidding. It seems almost kind of weirdly magical that you're going to get the answers if you're searching for the answers. So again, how serious are you about achieving this goal? And that's where the relevance and how realistic it is, and what resistance you might just be creating your own resistance because you're scared.
I love that. It's such a great reminder, and it just makes me think we just talked about this in the last week, the last couple of weeks, really. Sometimes it's a matter of our fears are really what's stopping us. And we've absolutely had this discussion. I've shared with you that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to put my fears into words and to give it, you know, to almost create it out there and say, okay, this is really what I'm afraid of happening. But it's almost the second that I put it into words, very quickly, I can come up with the reasons why, well, okay, I can probably handle this if this were to happen. Let's be honest, I've never been in a situation that's really that extreme. I think, Liz, I've shared with you, there are times that I have conversations with my husband, Garrett, and I will tell him, you know what, I'm really worried about something going totally haywire on this trip. Or you think about a family member getting in, a plane or an accident or something like that. And you're like, oh my gosh, I worry about this. I worry about that. It's very easy for us to start spiraling. And he's very quick to walk it back for me and say, how did you get from A to Z that fast? Sometimes you just have to slow your mind down and say, okay, if I put it out there and I have the conversation, I'm immediately taking away the power that that fear has, because realistically, and more often than not, you can work through whatever the situation or the scenario is pretty easily, and you can figure out, if you're facing that challenge, if you're facing that fear, you can figure out a way around it. We find out pretty quickly when we need to be resourceful that we can manage that pretty well. So I think it is important to remember and not let our fears take over, not let our fears be what holds us back from achieving these. So definitely a good reminder. I think something to kind of just keep asking yourself and keep in the front of your brain so that you know if that's what it is that's kind of holding you back. So this is one of the biggest ones for me. In the SMART goals, T stands for time bound. And I think Liz and I have both mentioned this. We are both procrastinators by nature. It's not something that I am proud of, but I'm very much aware of it. So I know what I need to do, I think, when this comes up. But making sure that whatever goal that we set is time bound. And I think that sometimes breaking it down into smaller time frames helps a little bit. But since this is something that I know is a weakness of mine, I'm very, very aware of this when I'm trying to set goals for myself. What about you, Liz? When you see time bound or time based, how does that make you feel? What do you think?
So, how many times in the last week we've said sorry to each other because of our schedules, because something has come up, some fire had popped up, and so yeah, we're definitely And I'm just going to own it. We're procrastinators, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I have read so much wonderful books, other commentary that you can basically teach yourself not to be a procrastinator. I think that's bordering on not being your authentic self. So I know that's a big one to say, oh, you're just using that as an excuse. I'm not saying that that's an excuse to put off everything until you feel like it. What I'm saying is, I think it's so important that we understand our strengths about ourselves, but I believe it's just as important to understand our weaknesses or implied weaknesses. So, and figure out a way to work around it. Figure out a way to work it. If you have a job, and I'm one of those people, I think I learned early on. Now, I was never chronically late to work. And especially in today's world, I think it's even worse. People just not showing up if they don't feel like it or taking sick days. I was raised with a very good work ethic to you show up to work no matter what. I don't care, unless, what was it, puking or a fever. So those are two reasons. So, but the point being is, if you continue to use these things, your weaknesses as an excuse, that can lead to that bad behavior. But if you say, okay, I have this weakness, so what do I need to do? I talked about it earlier. If you're a procrastinator, I have to work backwards from a goal when it's a time sensitive item. I have to figure out, okay, when is that absolute drop dead date, and then work back and say, okay, I can't leave this goal until the last 2 weeks. You have to spread it out. And those baby steps, I love baby steps because of procrastination. Then you're only saying, okay, I'm just going to do this little bit today. And you're writing down that minimal goal. So I think, that, um, you know, whether it's punching a clock, where I realized early on that, hey, I am way more of a salary person, because, it doesn't matter if I show up at 8:15 because I know I'm going to stay till 6 o'clock or whatever it is. So whatever those trade-offs are, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and then figure out a way to get through them. But I really think, find what creates the sense of urgency for you. Because again, how important is this goal to get done? Some goals are going to be more important than others. So try to create a sense of urgency so that the goal doesn't get set on the back burner.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way because I know I'm a procrastinator, and you're right, it's an implied weakness. I don't believe it's an actual weakness. It doesn't really stop me from achieving my goals. It may just light a little fire sometimes when I need it, but it does help to know that I've identified it. This is something that this is how I work. So I start from the end and I kind of work backwards and I break it down into the smaller steps. And that's how I know I'm still going to be able to manage what I need to achieve that goal in the time that I've referenced. I do want to very quickly, and I will give Liz credit for this because she kind of brought it up as a reminder. And I think it's such a great, you know, I think it's a great way to really show the difference between putting a goal out there and putting a SMART goal. And it's something that she and I deal with on a regular basis when we have conversations with our clients. We have people come to us all the time and say, do I have enough money to retire? Do you think that I'm prepared and equipped to retire? Well, if that's the only question and we don't know all the details of what you really are looking for in retirement or the time frame, we can't answer that question for you. So what we do is we do help break it down into, for all intents and purposes, whether you want to call them SMART goals or not, that's basically what we're doing, because there is a big difference between someone saying, do I have enough money to retire? And then saying, I know that when I retire at 65, I want to be able to have $5,000 a month. I want to know that I then have an extra $10,000 a year specifically for travel. I know that I want to be able to set money aside for my kid or for my grandkids in their 529s to help fund their colleges. So right away, we know, okay, if you plan to take extravagant vacations for the first 10 years or the first 15 years of your retirement, We know very specifically what your expectations are in retirement. We know that what we need to measure to get there to be able to make sure we're achieving those specific allocated goals. We know whether or not it's achievable or what you need to do to get there. We know if they are relevant, and we know what our time frame is to help get you to that point. So when you break it all down, the more specific you can be, the easier it is to measure. And then we know if it's achievable. We can help you figure out how it's relevant, and we know what our time basis is. All of those things factor into helping our clients to achieve their goals. And, if you want to call it, then, it's a successful retirement if you're able to achieve those goals. I think that that's what we want to keep in mind, and that's what we're aiming for along the way. So that was definitely, I think, a great reminder from Liz that is what we do on a regular basis, and it's good to keep in mind.
Well, yeah, and we're constantly reminding. I mean, how many times do you tell your clients, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay." Because again, we do things differently. We're disrupting the industry when we say we believe in balance. We want our clients, our community to understand that there is the possibility of enjoying life today and yet planning for your future. There, you can have both. We truly believe this. And it may require some prioritizing. It might require some focusing on what your goals truly are. And, but with a little guidance and a lot of kindness, I think people are going to be less intimidated. They're going to be less shamed, less fearful of all the, and less throwing their arms up and just saying, forget it, it's not worth it. That's what we're here to do. And so, yeah, so sometimes we get off a little bit on the topic, but that's really what we're here to do is help make things less intimidating and really more achievable and and just give you the kind of excitement, like even beyond peace of mind, the excitement that you have it in you to get to whatever goal you can envision for yourself. And that's really exciting to me. I've been doing it. Erin's been doing it. We've been doing it all of our lives. But and there are maybe a few little secrets, and that's what we're sharing with you. And we think anybody with a positive mindset and some personal responsibility can really make it happen for themselves.
Absolutely. So I think that is a great way to remind people that our mindset when we are looking at goals and how we achieve them and having conversations with our clients, that we take those SMART goals and we flip the script a little bit, but we need to focus on how do we make them wealthy SMART goals. So this podcast is called Wealthy Empowerment Now, and it is important to us to make sure that we're helping our clients find that balance, that we're doing it ourselves in our own lives. And like Liz said, there is a balance, but you can strike that balance and still make everything achievable in your life if you are focusing on those right things. So when we have SMART goals, S-M-A-R-T, how do we then turn them around and make them wealthy SMART goals? And we are talking wealthy with an H. All right. So when we're looking at wealthy goals, we look at the first letter in wealthy, W. For us, this means what benefits? What benefits are included if you achieve this goal for you? What benefits are then attained by others if you are achieving this goal? So Liz, how about you? When you look at the first letter in wealthy, what do you think?
I definitely think, talking about the SMART goals, I love them. They're great. But I think, again, we want to kind of disrupt it a little bit and tweak it and make it even a little bit more achievable. And when we look at that W and we're saying, what is your goal going to do to benefit you and others? So, what is your goal going to do to benefit you and others? One of the quotes that I like is be the woman who fixes another woman's crown without telling the world that it was crooked. I think sometimes women can be their own worst enemies. Yet we really have to not only focus on how is it going to benefit us, but how is it going to benefit others as well. We should be climbing the ladder of success and pulling up others with us. Never, ever do we should we need to have to step on others to get to where we are. So to me, that's a really, you want to talk about the benefits that you will experience, but you also want to be very cognizant of how you're helping those around you or your community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that sometimes when we think about the benefits that will come from achieving those goals, in my mind, I think it almost helps motivate us towards those goals as well, because once we start thinking about those, it almost like underlines the why for what we're doing. And I think that it really helps bring to the forefront of our minds, this is why this is so important to me, but this is what I'm going to get out of it. This is what, like you said, others are going to get out of it as well. But I think having that in mind as a motivator really does help encourage us. And it really helps it, like you said, to feel a little less intimidating. So, next letter in wealthy, H. We put the H there because it's a reminder of balance. But for us, when we're thinking of wealthy goals, it's the question for us, how do I proceed? How do I do this? How am I going to make this my reality? And I think that it's very important for us to ask those questions and figure that out, because everything that we can do to identify the how, I think really helps us to get closer to being prepared to meet those challenges along the way. Liz, how do you feel when you look at this and you think about that question?
It is. I mean, how do I take the first step? How do I take the second step? But the more you think about it, I'm already getting nervous just saying all these steps and going, oh my God, it just sounds so daunting. I mean, when you and I sit down and talk about steps of getting things done, it's like crazy. So try not to overwhelm yourself with that step. That's a step. I believe the how can be, you can come back. You can come back and every day if you want and just revisit that. What you want to be thinking about is, what step can I be taking right now that's just going to get me one little baby step closer to my goal? What you don't want to be doing, if possible, is to be taking a step away from your goal. Now, we all have bad days. There are going to be those days that you don't feel like getting out of bed. You don't feel like getting out of your pajamas. That's going to happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not getting closer to your goals. Sometimes that's just like, refreshing your batteries. So I think sometimes we need that, and don't just immediately believe that you're a failure because you didn't take the step that you said you were going to take today. So it's, how do you take that first step, the second step, the third step? The more you can write down on, the steps that it takes, the better. But also be kind to yourself when you're going through what the next obvious step is. And if it takes you a little bit longer to get one step done, just keep giving yourself grace and letting yourself, take the time that it needs to get it done.
Definitely. I think that's definitely something that we have a hard time allowing ourselves to do sometimes, is if we need to take a pause, it's okay. Maybe that's part of the how we get there. We have to give ourselves a little bit of a break sometimes. And we do need to recharge and rebalance and put things back in perspective sometimes. And that's okay. So the next letter in wealthy is E. We believe this can stand for elaborating your journey. So if there are things where we've talked about it many times before, we're big proponents of writing things down. So elaborate again what it looks like. I think that this kind of gets into even a little more detail of being specific, but continue to remind yourself along the way what that's going to feel like, what it's going to look like, how it's going to affect your life in every step. Liz, what do you think when you think of elaborate?
It's the visualization. And can you write down what you are imagining? Because again, the more elaborate the detail is, really the more realistic your goal is, then that you can really achieve this. And I like what you said about, how do you feel? You're not just saying, at this age, I'm going to pay off this debt. How will that make you feel to do that when that happens? That could be actually a changing point as to whether or not it's a good goal. Because if you say, I don't know, I don't really care. and that might be an answer. And there might be a difference in you or your spouse when you're thinking about, how important is it to pay off that house? I mean, we live in a world in the Financial Planning Association where they say it's okay to have your home as a debt. And yet I always say it's an emotional answer. When I ask my clients, how important is it for you to pay off your home? And you're going to get one of two answers. I mean, you can see the stress on their face when they still have that mortgage. And then there's, like me, I don't care. So, I mean, sure, would we all like to just be out of debt? But how, again, elaborate on what does that journey look like? How important is the goal to you?
Yeah, I agree with this part completely because it is a great reminder. We're told over and over again what you have to do or what you should do, but then there's also how it makes us feel. And you're right, we have these conversations on a regular basis with people. And I tell people all the time there's good debt and there's bad debt. And sometimes the good debt can help you leverage in ways that will help you achieve other goals. And sometimes it's a matter of prioritizing where you're focusing your resources. But you're absolutely right, Liz. There are certainly people out there that they don't care if they carry a mortgage payment into retirement. They may have a mortgage payment that's only $900 a month. And so for them to carry that into retirement, if they have the resources available, it's not going to be the make or break thing for them. And then there's other people that it doesn't matter if it's good debt, if it doesn't matter if it's bad debt, any debt is bad, it's stressful, it's going to keep me up at night. And I just need to make sure it's paid off and everything I have, I own free and clear. And I think a lot of it does come down to, you said it, it's a very emotional, perspective. And some people, I think a lot has to do with the value that we place on money, our relationship with money, and how we've been raised or the experiences that we've encountered along the way that make us feel one way or another about how we are going to manage our resources and our money along the way. So I think that that's definitely something important, that we have to keep having those conversations. And it's okay if your way of handling things is maybe not what is considered the norm or appropriate, you know, based on whoever it is out there that's giving the advice. I think that we all make decisions that have to suit our lifestyle and our personalities and our character. And along the way, we do what we can to make sure that we're following what we believe is right for us. And that's okay.
And again, I just want to touch on as our role as our client's wealth coach or wealth advisor, we're there to give you guidance. Not necessarily, I always say, I'm not necessarily the boss, the client's the boss, but I'm definitely giving guidance. I'm definitely giving a little an opinion. But really, at the end of the day, we want them to feel better about their situation. And as long as they're not completely going in the wrong direction, that again, that goes to that disruption in our industry. As long as we can strike a balance, we're okay saying, yeah, you can spend a little bit more this year, or, you can go on that trip that you've always wanted to go on if you believe that there's some other offsets that we can make for that. So, or some other adjustments.
Yeah. And we've talked about it before, not to, keep going down the road on this one too far, but it's true. I think one of the most difficult things that someone can hear from an advisor, they walk in to get advice, is, oh no, you cannot do this. It's absolutely not possible. I highly recommend that you change everything. And there's nothing that is going to benefit someone telling them they need to make this extreme shift from where they're at to where they need to be. To me, in my perspective, all it does is it creates more fear, and people will become paralyzed. They won't make a decision. Then they won't do anything to change because then they figure, well, why bother? I'm this far gone. I can't do anything to change it, or I have to drastically give everything up to achieve that goal. And more often than not, people are not even going to try. So go back to, how do we find that balance? Find what your baby step or your micro yes is, and we can work towards achieving, whatever it is that we're setting aside as those goals together to get you there. So next letter in wealthy is A. I love this one. We believe it stands for accept, it is meant to be, or it is meant to succeed. We've talked a lot about envisioning it and kind of your words have energy, your thoughts create, your reality. And so the more that you can do to accept that it's given that you're going to achieve this goal, I think the better it puts you in the right mindset to achieve it. There's a big difference between saying, I want to retire at 65 and I am going to retire at 65. I think it really just it helps to empower people. It gives that control back to you, and you are able to envision it in a way that is so much more powerful. So, Liz, how about you when you think about the letter A in wealthy?
It's really so exciting, honestly, because it is that point where you take that goal or dream, and it's that next step of envisioning, like like you start talking about it. So who are your support? Who's your support system? Who's your community? Who's your tribe? And who are you sharing your plans with? Honestly, when I start sharing some plans with people, especially those first couple of times, my heart's pumping and nervous and okay. And just instead of saying, well, I'm working on this plan, or I'm hoping, or I want to do this. When you say, I am creating this company, or I am creating this vision, or I am working on my articles, I'm working on a book, the difference of I am or I'm hoping to, it's so much different. So when you take that acceptance, again, it's kind of like this magical world that things start happening for you because you have accepted the challenge and now you're going to start working on it. So it really starts the movement happening so much quicker than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And I think once you accept it, you almost incorporate it into your routine, your daily routine, your whatever it is that you have to do on a weekly basis. Once you've accepted that this is what you are focused on, there are no questions anymore. It's just this is you figure out what you got to do to get there. So I think that that is such
It becomes who you are.
absolutely. So then we get into the L for wealthy. Is it a lifelong goal that you are looking forward to making changes for? Is it going to be something more short term? I think defining if this is going to be a shift in your behavior for life makes it a little bit more, I think, understanding what it is that you're going to have to take on to get there. And it really just elucidates what it is that you are doing and what you're putting your efforts into more so. So, Liz, what do you think when you think of this?
Absolutely. Tying back into the last, accepting that it's meant to be. I love my diet talk because I'm on an endless diet and I'm guilty of it, of saying this isn't a lifelong change. I just want it to happen, 5 pounds at a time. So one of the things that I've gotten a little more into is this thing called the Blue Zone diet. And if you want to look it up, we'll post it on our website or something, but or it's really easy to find. But anyways, the point of it being is it really has helped me to focus more on lifestyle changes, lifelong changes, commitments to not just eating an extra cup of lentils every day, but really making sure that I'm getting out and taking a walk every day, or I'm gardening, or just doing more activity. So different things than you'd normally, I mean, we all talk about movement and everything, but when you think about it as a lifelong goal, or the life of the goal being a specific time frame, I think it helps you to really embody that goal when you have that mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's such a good thing for us to kind of remember is the more that you can incorporate it into, you say embody it, but the more that you can incorporate it into your life really just helps give it more power and helps push you to that next step. So next letter in wealthy is T. We look at this and we say, okay, turning points. They're going to happen. We're going to have moments where if we set a goal for ourselves, especially the longer term the goal is, if we're looking at this and it is a lifelong, something that we are working towards, we're going to reach points where we have to pivot, where we have to change. If anybody's ever watched Friends and is a big fan of Friends, you can't say the word pivot. Side note, without thinking pivot. But that's what we do. I mean, we do it with our clients all the time, with people that we talk to, and we give guidance on life happens and it's okay. There are things that are going to come up. Liz, I know you've referred to them as potholes in the road before, but it's how we adjust, it's how we shift, and then keep ourselves on track from there. So the more that we can do, I think, to prepare ourselves for those turning points where we have to make a decision one way or the other, the more likely we're going to succeed with those goals. And I think the easier it's going to be to recover from them and maybe not let them bring us down or become too negative if we hit something and we feel like, okay, this is it, it's a sign. We don't want to let ourselves go there. We want to be able to keep working towards it. So being prepared for those, I think, makes such a difference. Liz, how do you have those conversations around turning points with clients, and how do you look at this from your perspective?
For me, like the T is just, like a things change, and that's okay. Because I think it's so easy to get stuck in that this was my goal. And now that it's changed, now I'm a failure. Or what is wrong with me that that goal isn't good enough anymore, or the goal's too not achievable, or whatever it is. Things change, stuff happens. So, to put it nicely. So, again, we definitely do have to give ourselves grace and just accept that stuff's going to happen. When Erin and I are talking with our clients, one of the very, very key important things that we do, one of the steps in our financial planning, is monitoring our clients' portfolios. Because if anybody knows what direction the stock markets are going to go, for sure, 100%, for sure, please, we'd be on an island by now.
Let
But
us
the
know.
nobody knows. Nobody knows. We can talk about all the experts who've gotten it wrong over and over and over again. So the point is things change and you make adjustments. And that's what we help you to do. That's what you need to do when you're looking into your goal setting for yourself. And by the way, the pivot scene from Friends is season 5, episode 16, titled "The One with the Cop." Just in case, because it's so good.
Thank you for that. Important things in life, right?
Right, for sure.
I love
So,
it. Okay, awesome. So moving on, the next letter in wealthy is H. For us, this really is just a reminder to keep in everything that we're doing, try to do it with a healthy mindset. We know that it's not easy. We are all somehow automatically ingrained to talk to ourselves more negatively, to talk ourselves out of things that we may believe are right for us. But the more that we can do to carry on a healthier conversation with others and carry on a healthier conversation with ourselves, I think is going to help guide us along that way. It is very easy to talk yourself out of things and say, it's not that important. I'm just not going to deal with it. You know what? That's a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I just feel like I need to relax right now. I mean, we know you're going to have those days, but don't let that be the mindset that takes over. A healthier mindset allows us to stay focused on the balance and to prioritize what's important to us. And if we have certain goals, attack them with a healthy mindset, because it allows us to get more excited along the way and to stay motivated and to stay encouraged and to share it with others who think the same way, who are of the same mind, who will help kind of keep you going along the way as well. So, Liz, what do you think about this one?
so let it go is my quote that goes along with the healthy mindset. The fears, the anxiety, the bad days, the pajama days, it's going to happen. There's going to be bad stuff that happens. So you're right. It's part of it is, we're talking about things changing. At some point, maybe the healthy mindset is telling you to really shift the goal potentially, but it also might be saying, don't you dare. Don't you dare back down from this one because it's too important. And we're all tempted, at first glance, to when things, hit the rocks, when it starts the bumpy road, the potholes, maybe it's just something out of whack in your own personal life, remember we talk about having that balance so that you're not, so that your whole life is kind of in order, so that you're not driving on a flat tire. So I think, you know, kind of going back and saying, why am I having this anxiety? Why am I having the fear? Questioning things before you just say, you're going to pivot and that's it. And I'm done with this. So I think it's really, I kind of have learned, and again, this is not something I knew in my 20s, though I will say was a student in the Dale Carnegie course, one of the best courses for positive mental attitudes. I will say that when you're down, like you kind of learn that there's a time period that you bounce back from. That's normal. And this goes into the healthy and self-care. And I think, we're not doctors. We're not giving, advice when it comes to medical situations, but there is I've learned about myself that I have a period of time that I kind of like ebb and flow, and there's this normal period of time. But maybe if it's not getting back up, we're on the high side of things, maybe that's the time to enlist the help of a counselor of some sort too. So and there's such a stigma in our whole culture of not needing help because you're too strong and this and that. I look at a therapist. I have a therapist, and I think for so many people, it's like a life coach. It just gets you through sometimes when you have those tough times. That's just a side note. And again, we can, provide additional disclosures on that, but because we're not practicing in that field, but we definitely believe in a healthy mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, we're not doctors. However, we are human. And so we do understand that the things that you can encounter along the way in life that create the anxiety, that create the fear. And you're right, there is still that mentality of, I don't need to ask for help and I can do it on my own. And that's a signal of strength. That's what many of us were taught. But I think that it's a more mature mindset, or maybe a little more wisdom and experience along the way, that does teach us there's strength in the community that you surround yourself with. There is strength in asking for help from others when you need it, and that's okay. And we are not necessarily great at doing that right off the bat. I think it's something that we learn as we grow and as we meet others that we can trust and share certain vulnerabilities with and be more open with. And we do experience this, Liz and I, with our clients quite often, where there is information that people bring to us that they feel they should be ashamed of being at a certain stage or at a certain point. And sometimes it's just having someone else there with you to say, it's okay. There is nothing wrong with this. We are going to do great. We're going to work through this together, and knowing the steps that you need to take to get to where you want to be. But that helps nurture that strength. And I think that confidence along the way that we all need and we're all seeking, as we grow. So the last letter, that just to wrap this up, is why. We believe, we look at this and we say, well, this is yours. This is your goal. This is your time. And you can absolutely do this. And so if you're following the steps along the way, and even if you're hitting those little pivots or those little, potholes in the road, and you have to make an adjustment because things need to change, this is for you. And do not let others take that away from you. Do not let others minimize that. Do not let others tell you, you can't do that. You're out of your mind. Remember that this is really about helping yourself to grow to the next stage or where you want to be, and doing what is right for you that will also be right in helping others as well. So Liz, do you have some thoughts you want to share on this?
Yes, you got this, girl. That is my why. If you're still sitting here listening to us, watching us, reading this, and you have everything you need to start down this path. So that's the cool part, is you've hung in there. Something interested you about setting goals, and you may have been sitting here the whole time saying, no way, can't do this. No way, can't do this. Just the fact that you sat here and listened to this and took us seriously and didn't laugh beyond too many times of the pivots and all those things, but we appreciate laughter, so it's okay. But the reality is you got this, and we're here to support you. We have a community to support you. Outreach with your family, your friends, those closest to you. Just never stop believing in yourself. It's all about you. Even though that sounds ridiculously selfish in our world today, it is all about you, because the healthier you become, the healthier everybody around you is going to feel and become as well.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much for those thoughts, for sharing all the information. We do believe, Liz and I believe wholeheartedly, that having this wealthy mindset and perspective, adding that to your SMART goals, really helps to remove some of the intimidation, helps you to feel more empowered along the way. When you think about the impact that you'll have not only in your own life, but those around you, those that you care about, and the difference that you can make when you are living your life with feeling fulfilled and living it with purpose and following those passions and achieving those goals. We do believe that that is what gives you that wealthy lifestyle, that wealthy life that we so want to encourage everybody to follow along the way. So keep those things in mind as you're goal setting, as you're planning, as you're thinking about your future.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things we want to make sure you realize, and we hope you realize at this point, that wealthy goals are not boring goals. So every other book that you've ever read about goals, I find to be a little bit intimidating and boring. So this should not be boring, and it should not be something that you dread. They should get you excited to get going and to continue on your journey. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. So it comes with a bit of effort, but you're here, and Erin and I will be here to help you along the way. So we really appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in. We hope something that we have shared has been a little bit encouraging, a little bit empowering. We look forward to seeing you again with us next time, or having you listen in next time. And we hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Investment advisory services are offered through Wealthy Empowerment Network, an investment advisor in the states of Illinois, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Ohio. Kona Financial Planning and Infinity Wealth Company, LLC are doing business as, or DBA names of Wealthy Empowerment Network, LLC. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing should be construed as personalized advice or recommendation of any kind. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decisions. All expressions of opinion are subject to change without notice, and there is no guarantee that any claims made will come to pass. We do not guarantee the accuracy of the information provided. There is no assurance that any investment, plan, or strategy will be successful. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal.